The morning began like any other, but it did not stay that way. Emma Carter woke before her alarm, staring at the ceiling as rain tapped softly against the window. The house was quiet, too quiet. She moved through her routine with practiced ease, making coffee, packing lunches, answering polite questions with polite smiles. Everything worked. Everything functioned. Yet something inside her felt dull, like a light left on too long. Outside, Portland looked washed and gray. Emma walked to the cafe near her office, her coat pulled tight, her thoughts drifting. She was not unhappy, she reminded herself. She had stability, respect, a life many people wanted. Still, her steps felt heavy, as if she was carrying a question she could not name. The cafe line moved slowly. The smell of coffee filled the room. Emma checked her phone, then looked up without resand, saw him. Daniel Brooks stood near the window, tall, quiet, holding his cup as if he had forgotten why he ordered it. He was not striking in an obvious way, but there was something steady about him. His posture was calm, his face thoughtful. When their eyes met, the moment felt sudden and sharp, like stepping into cold water. They both looked away. Emma told herself it meant nothing. People notice people. That was all. She ordered her drink and left, but the sense of interruption stayed with her. The day moved fast after that. Meetings, emails, deadlines. Yet Daniel's face returned to her mind without warning, slipping into quiet moments like a thought she could not push out. The next morning, she saw him again. Same cafe, same window. This time, he noticed her first and nodded politely. She nodded back, no words, no reason to speak. Still, the air felt different. Days passed, then weeks. Autumn settled in. Leaves changed color. The city softened. Emma began to notice patterns she had never noticed before. Daniel walked the same route she did. He favored the same bookstore. He sat on the same park bench during lunch breaks. When they finally spoke, it happened without planning. They stood in line at the bookstore, both reaching for the same novel. Daniel smiled, surprised. "Sorry," he said. His voice was calm, warm. Emma smiled back. "You can take it." He shook his head. "You saw it first." They laughed lightly. The moment felt easy. They talked about books, then weather, then how busy the city felt even when it looked quiet. Nothing personal, nothing risky. When they parted, Emma realized. Her chest felt lighter. That feeling scared her. After that, small conversations became normal. Short greetings, shared comments, passing jokes. Emma learned Daniel worked in urban planning. Daniel learned Emma managed communications for a nonprofit. Facts stayed safe. Yet their talks carried an unspoken energy, a pull neither named. One afternoon, Emma mentioned her family without thinking. Daniel listened closely. Then he shared that he was married too. The words landed between them like a line drawn in ink. Something shifted. From that moment on, they were careful. Smiles softened. Their distance grew. But the connection did not fade. It sharpened. The restraint gave it shape. Emma noticed how Daniel listened, truly listened, without interrupting or fixing. Daniel noticed how Emma spoke honestly without trying to impress. They did not flirt. They did not touch. Still, something lived in the space between them, alive and restless. Emma argued with herself at night. She told herself this was harmless. Then she told herself it was dangerous. Society did not forbid kindness, but it did warn against emotional doors opening in the wrong direction. Daniel felt the same weight. He loved his family. He believed in commitment. Yet he had not felt understood like this in years. The realization filled him with guilt and sadness at the same time. One evening, after a long day, Daniel sent a message. He almost erased. "Do you ever feel like life chose for you?" Emma stared at her phone when it buzzed. The question felt too close to true. She knew answering it crossed something invisible but important. Her fingers hovered. She thought of her responsibilities, her promises. Then she thought of the quiet ache she carried every day. She answered, "Yes," she wrote. "More often than I admit." From that moment, the pace of everything changed. Their messages stayed careful but deep. They spoke about choices, timing, and the strange ways people grow apart from their own dreams. They did not complain about their lives. They reflected on them that made it harder. Emma began noticing things she had ignored for years. How silence filled rooms that once held laughter. How conversations at home stayed on the surface. None of it was wrong. It was simply empty. Daniel noticed the same. His life was orderly, predictable, safe. But safety without closeness felt lonely. They did not meet alone on purpose. They did not plan secret moments. Fate, however, seemed persistent. They crossed paths during lunch walks. They shared a bench during a crowded event. Each time they kept space. Each time the silence said more than words. Emma tried to pull back. She skipped the cafe, changed routes, focused harder at work. But avoidance did not erase feeling. It only made it louder inside her. Daniel respected the distance. He never pushed. That respect deepened Emma's trust, which frightened her more than anything else. One rainy evening, Emma stood on her porch, the city glowing softly around her. She read their last message again. Nothing inappropriate. Nothing obvious. Yet her heart knew the truth. This connection was becoming something society warned against, not because it was cruel or careless, but because it was real. She took a deep breath and closed her phone. Inside, she whispered to herself that some mistakes begin not with bad intentions, but with unmet needs. She did not know how the story would end. She only knew it had already begun, quietly, with two people who never meant to cross a line and yet stood closer to it than they ever planned. Daniel Brooks stared out the window of his apartment in Vancouver, watching the city lights blink through the drizzle. Rain ran in thin streaks down the glass, tracing paths as unpredictable. The room was quiet, but his mind was loud. Every message from Emma replayed like a gentle echo, a reminder of the closeness he was not supposed to feel, a warmth that was forbidden. He loved his wife, yes, but the years had built a wall between them, polite, solid, and cold. Yet with Emma, even the smallest words carried meaning, weight, and a sense of understanding he hadn't known he missed. Their exchanges had grown deeper over time. Not one of them had crossed physical boundaries, but the emotional intimacy had become undeniable. They shared regrets, unfulfilled dreams, quiet fears, and the strange comfort of feeling truly understood. Each text was careful, never inappropriate, always measured, yet each carried a pull that neither could ignore. Daniel's thumb hovered over his phone, sometimes for minutes, staring at her words and thinking about all the things he could soar. Could not. Emma felt the same way. At night, she held her phone and reread his messages, feeling both guilty and relieved. Aware that society's rules were never meant to be broken, yet powerless to stop her heart from responding. They met by accident, or maybe it wasn't an accident at all. It was a late October afternoon, and the rain was steady, drumming against umbrellas and coats in a soft, constant rhythm. Emma was running an errand, her hair damp under her hood, hands tucked deep into her pockets. Daniel was there too, picking up a package at the small shipping store near the corner. Their eyes met as they both ducked under the same awning to escape the rain. For a moment, everything stopped. The city noise dimmed. The raindrops paused, and only the distance between them remained. "This is wrong," Emma whispered, barely audible, her voice steady despite the trembling in her chest. Daniel's eyes met hers with the same weight of recognition. "I know," he said softly. They didn't step closer, didn't touch, yet every second stretched like hours, filled with the unsaid. Their hands itched to reach, their hearts ached to bridge the gap, but neither moved. The rules existed for a reason, and even in the quiet storm around them, they respected them. Their restraint was not weakness. It was proof of their awareness of the consequences. Walking away was harder than standing still. Emma left first, keeping her pace brisk, trying to let the rain wash away the thoughts she couldn't shake. Daniel followed moments later, keeping to the opposite side of the street, feeling the emptiness of her absence before she was even out of sight. That night, both of them stared at their reflections in the dark, questioning the choices that had brought them to this point. They had never spoken about crossing boundaries. Yet the emotional closeness they shared was dangerous in its own quiet way. Days turned into weeks. They continued to see each other in familiar spots, the cafe, the bookstore, the park, but always in public, always at a safe distance. Their messages continued, carefully structured, yet emotionally charged. They discussed books, music, dreams, and the kind of life they had once imagined but never fully pursued. In each conversation, they revealed a little of themselves, carefully, like peeling layers from an onion, conscious of how easily feelings could overwhelm. Emma often wondered if she was enjoying the attention too much, if the small thrill of being understood was pushing her into dangerous territory. Daniel had the same fear. The line was there, unspoken, clear, yet invisible. Emma started noticing subtle changes in her own life. Moments that had once passed unnoticed now felt significant. She noticed how empty the silences at home had become, how much she longed for connection that did not involve judgment or responsibility. Daniel felt it too. He loved his family, but the comfort of routine had dulled the spark of living, its conversations. With Emma reminded him that life was more than duties and obligations. It was also moments of feeling, connection, and being fully seen. One evening, after a particularly long day, Emma and Daniel exchanged a short message. "Do you think people ever really choose their own paths?" Daniel asked. The words were simple but heavy, a reflection of both longing and restraint. Emma stared at her phone, heart pounding. She knew the answer in the depth of her chest. "Sometimes," she replied, "but sometimes life chooses for us, whether we like it or not." That night, neither could sleep. Thoughts of each other circled in their minds, tender and persistent. A week later, they met again, unexpectedly, at a small farmer's market. The rain had stopped, but the air was damp, carrying the smell of wet leaves and earth. They reached for the same basket of apples, their hands brushing for a fraction of a second. Neither flinched, neither pulled away. Their eyes met, and in that silent glance, years of longing and careful avoidance converged. "This doesn't have to be complicated," Daniel said, voice low. Emma shook her head. "It already is," she replied. She smiled faintly, though. Her eyes glimmered with unspoken emotion. They continued walking together, side by side, but not touching, talking about trivial things, yet feeling every word resonate deeper than ordinary conversation should. The days that followed were a delicate dance. Both tried to maintain the normalcy of their lives, but each interaction left traces of emotion that could not be erased. Emma found herself replaying every word, every glance, every small gesture. Daniel did the same. Their restraint was proof of their integrity, yet the longing persisted, stubborn and quiet. One evening, Emma made a decision. She would step back, limit her interactions, and focus on her family. She knew that continuing this connection, even without physical contact, risked emotional damage. Daniel respected her choice. Their messages became fewer, shorter, safer, but the bond never broke completely. It existed quietly in their memories, in the glances shared across crowded spaces, in the rain-soaked streets where they once stood under the same awning. Months later, bait again at a charity event, both attending for their respective organizations. The brief smile they exchanged carried years of understanding, restraint, and shared emotion. No words were necessary. They had both grown, learned, and understood the fragile weight of human desire. Some mistakes are prohibited not because the act itself is harmful, but because the heart can carry consequences that ripple far beyond the moment. Emma left the event first, Daniel following shortly after. In the soft night, as they parted once. Again, there was no promise, no expectation, only recognition. They had discovered the depth of feeling that could exist without crossing boundaries. They had faced temptation and chosen restraint, proving that some of the most profound connections are not measured by what we do, but by what we choose not to do. Life continued for both of them. Emma's home regained its quiet warmth, filled with family and routine, while Daniel focused on rebuilding closeness with his wife, mindful of the lessons he had learned. They never spoke of their emotional closeness again. Yet both carried the memory as a quiet testament to human longing, restraint, and understanding. In the end, the story of Emma and Daniel was not one of scandal or heartbreak. It was a story of quiet emotion, of forbidden yet restrained feelings, of the complexity of human hearts navigating desire, responsibility, and moral boundaries. It reminded them and anyone who might hear their tale that sometimes the greatest drama lies not in what we do, but in what we choose not to do. Some mistakes are prohibited by society. Yes, but they are also attempted because humans are drawn to connection, understanding, and the rare fragile moments where another person sees the truth inside us. Emma and Daniel's story showed that such moments, even when unfulfilled, can leave a mark not as a wound, but as a reminder of our humanity, and so life went on. Rain fell, seasons changed, and the quiet city lights of Vancouver and Portland continued to flicker. People lived, loved, and learned. Some mistakes were made, others avoided, and sometimes the invisible choices between right and wrong shaped hearts more deeply than any action ever could. Emma and Daniel were proof that restraint could be beautiful, longing could be profound, and human emotion, even when prohibited, could teach the most enduring lessons.